This week, I'm joined by Mr. Matt Alderman to discuss how Synopsys and Ixia are going to collaborate. Digital Shadows announces a significant update to its Searchlight platform. Checkpoint introduces a high-performance security gateway and 9 steps to lock down your corporate browsers. In our second segment, even, Luis Giraldo, VP of Strategy at Kaseya, will join us to talk about unified IT and the capabilities of Kaseya's IT Complete platform. In our final segment, we welcome Michael Aiello, Director of Product Management of Google Cloud Security, to talk about security responsibility in the hybrid and multi-cloud. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Prevention-based tools leave you blind to threats inside your network. By adding network traffic analysis to your SOC, you can find and stop attackers before they make their move. ExtraHop provides complete visibility at enterprise scale. Detect threats 95% faster with machine learning that helps Tier 1 analysts perform like seasoned threat hunters. Visit extrahop.com/Security Weekly to learn why the SANS Institute calls ExtraHop fast and amazingly thorough. That's extrahop.com/Security Weekly. Networks are becoming increasingly complex and fragmented, and digital transformation and DevOps are driving an explosion in network connectivity changes. With each new network connection, cyber attackers may gain another opening to breach or traverse the network. At Tufin, they've pioneered a policy-based approach to network security management using automation and analytics. As a result, you can make network changes in minutes instead of days, reliably and securely. To learn more about Tufin, the security policy company, go to securityweekly.com/Tufin and sign up for a free evaluation. By the end of 2020, 99% of exploited vulnerabilities will be publicly disclosed and known to IT system admins. The consequences of that fact means the burglar will already be in your house because you left the front door wide open by failing to patch known vulnerabilities. How can you keep the threat actors out? Through cloud-based automation, Automox enables you to slam the door on unpatched OS and third-party vulnerabilities across your entire Windows, Mac, and Linux infrastructure. Take advantage of a free trial with Automox to not only see the vulnerability status of your infrastructure, but do something about it within minutes. Start automating the fundamentals of cyber hygiene at securityweekly.com/Automox. That's securityweekly.com/Automox. Welcome to episode 146 of Enterprise Security Weekly for July 24th, 2019. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined here in studio by Mr. Matt Alderman. Matt, welcome.
Happy Tequila Day.
It is. We need some tequila for the show.
We should have made Mexican coffee.
Is that just coffee with tequila in it? Did you just make that up?
Yeah. Irish coffee is with a...
I see
Mexican coffee, just throw a shot of tequila in and we're good to go.
Right, or we could just drink the tequila separately from the coffee.
Yeah, we could line up shots for the show.
No, the last time I did that, my wife was really pissed when I got home. We can't do that. Maybe I'll have like one margarita or something.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
We'll work on it.
Now I was thinking about drinking now. I'm really distracted.
Yeah, you got to do your announcements.
I know.
We do
now
news.
we have to work and stuff. We have exciting news about the Security Weekly webcast program. We are now partnered with ISC Squared as an official CPE provider. If you attend any of our webcasts, you will be receiving 1 CPE credit per webcast. That is one and only one. If you want more, send me no. You get one. That's it. Register for all of our upcoming webcasts with ISC Squared by going to securityweekly.com/webcast. Well, there's still our webcast. You just get credit. Or is there what? But there is one coming up today with ISC
Squared.
Okay.
But I think we can also retroactive. So anybody that goes out to On Demand and views our old webcast, then we'll track those and we'll submit those to ISC Squared as well because you viewed the webcast there. So go to the On Demand library.
securityweekly.com/on demand. How about that?
There you go.
Security news. That's what we're doing now. That was the only announcement. We can just dig right into it, Matt. I have 15 stories. We're not going to get to all 15. If you want to read about all of the 15 stories that I did put in the show notes this week that are pulled very carefully from various sources, you can do that at wiki.securityweekly.com. Where do you want to start, Matt?
Well, I was looking through the list, and I'm like, some are a little more exciting than others. An interesting one, the Synopsys one, because it's not the Synopsys the way I would have thought Synopsys, right? Synopsys is an interesting company.
It's like chips.
Yeah. So they have a big chip business.
Microchips, right?
Yep, they do a bunch on the
not
silicon.
Potato chips,
not potato chips. Microprocessors. This story is related to that piece, where I originally thought it was going to be related more to their application security portfolio, and it's not. So this announcement's really on the chip side of the business, with Ixia and doing some interesting things pre and post silicon or something like that. So not as interesting.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, it's hardware.
Yeah, we pull Synopsys because typically their application security portfolio is something that I track, because a lot of people don't realize that Synopsys is a $3 billion company with a $300 million application security portfolio embedded in it.
Yes.
It's one of the largest.
Similar to ServiceNow. Revenue-wise, I don't remember where we put ServiceNow. I looked it up once. It might have been 1 or 2 billion,
but
maybe
again,
not quite 3.
they have a small, they have a security.
And security is a subsection.
Of that. So,
Ixia is pretty much a security play.
It is, and
right.
so that's why when I first saw this article, I was thinking, Ixia is doing something with the application stuff, and that together they were going to do something, but this is all chip related, so not as interesting as I initially thought.
Gotcha.
For me, anyways.
Let's see. I like the one about Azure.
Yes.
I think this is very telling. I think if you're making technology decisions, Azure's likely somewhere in your future, right?
If you're an enterprise and you're leveraging Microsoft products, which a lot of enterprises are.
I mean, most are, right?
Right. Microsoft's made it really easy to leverage Azure. And what's more important about this story, and we've covered this in various shows and news around Microsoft, is Microsoft's made some very strategic investments for survivability, in my opinion. That years ago we would have all thought Microsoft email, Microsoft Office with Google and Gmail, Microsoft was heading to just collapse. But they've made very concerted efforts strategically to really move towards the cloud, move their enterprise customers to the cloud, Azure being a big part of that.
Get away from the mobile market was their first, one of their first fantastic strategic decisions. Although Nokia used to make really awesome phones.
They did.
They had a play there, but I think it fell down on the software side of it from what I could tell.
I think they were way too late to the mobile market.
Yeah.
They acquired Nokia in the phone business or made a partnership or whatever. It just did not go well. iPhone and Android had really...
one of those older Nokia phones, the little square ones, were like 310s or something like that, and it had like a case on it. And they're like, that's the most useless thing ever is the case. And someone's comment was, it protects the floor when you drop it. They don't make phones like that anymore. They're all glass now, and they break when you drop them.
Right, exactly.
Back in the day, you could huck that thing off of the roof of a building, and like the ground would have a dent in it.
Right, it was a brick is what it was. Yeah, it was a brick model of this phone. But
they also, I think, started the transition to move their own stuff to the cloud operating system and applications. They also, I think, cleaned up their hardware platforms, right? I think the Surface is very strategic, right? I think it's more of a laptop rather than so much of a tablet, but they did a fantastic job. Anytime I consider hardware, I always look at the Surface, and I'm like, it really is like I mean, you know how much of a hardware geek I am, right? I'm like, it's a beautiful piece of machinery. It really is. And they've done really well with it in the market.
Yeah. It has advantages over the iPad, even though I don't use any Microsoft Windows devices currently. I think I will for my studio at home have to go to the Intel NUC and get some additional performance there, primarily because of Skype. And look, Skype just runs better in Microsoft than it does on the Mac. The Mac suffers.
Agreed.
For lots of reasons.
Although Linux they've done an okay job with.
Interesting. I mean, my Mac just does not run Skype well. It just sucks up CPU like nobody's business. But this article is interesting. Is Microsoft's biggest business segment is now the one that includes Azure. This is part of that strategic move, and that's the future for Microsoft. And this is why you continue to see accelerated growth on Azure, and I think you will continue to see it because Microsoft's all in the cloud, and that's survivability.
And Linux is being integrated in the operating system more and more every time we
adding the Linux kernel into it. They're going to do a lot more, I think, in the cloud offerings and really compete with Amazon from a cloud play.
I'm hesitant to jump into Azure because I feel like Amazon is such a great job with the Linux side of all things cloud in applications, whereas if I feel like I go to Microsoft, I feel like they're still giving a little bit of precedent to although a large percentage of Azure is running on Linux.
Yeah,
it was something like 40% or something like that the last I looked.
Yeah. So Microsoft is here to stay.
They've done a great job of transforming the company.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the hardest thing for large companies like that to do is transform their business to stay, to keep survival, right? And shift huge amounts of revenue from a set of products that were dying and losing traction in the market to a whole new set of cloud offerings that are allowing them to continue to grow.
What I would like to see from Microsoft that I think would really address many of the security issues that we have on the client today is for them to come up with a competition to the Chromebook, right? To have a light version of their Surface, for example, license that to other manufacturers, have a trimmed down version of the OS that uses the cloud basically for everything, just like Google does, right? And I'm not saying the Chromebooks don't and Chrome OS doesn't have exploits. It's just, I think, untapped waters, but really limits what the client is able to do and could very well limit the attack surface on the endpoint, which I think would be a huge win.
It would. And that kind of ties into your article towards the end about locking down the browser, right? Because if you think about what Chromebook does really well, it leverages Chrome and Chrome OS really for those browser-based applications.
The problem is Microsoft's browser sucks. That's why they haven't done that.
Right, exactly. Because Edge, I don't think is...
It sucks.
Yeah, it sucks.
It's basically
basically, right? And in the 9 tips they put in here, my first tip is just go to Chrome. Because Chrome,
or Firefox. Yeah. Firefox has got some interesting updates coming up in their releases.
I think Chrome's done a really good job of keeping itself updated, patched in a way that the user doesn't have to worry about it.
Firefox
so you don't have to deal with all the other things.
Yeah.
So
Firefox also doesn't eat up as many resources now as Chrome. Because Chrome went the other way, right? Chrome used to be the lean and mean browser.
Yeah, now it's
heavy. They built so much into it, probably for their Chrome OS and other, browser add-on support and all that stuff. Now it is an operating system in and of itself, and it'll grab resources like there's no tomorrow.
So I have, I don't know, probably 15, 20 tabs open. And the problem with Chrome, again, from a CPU memory utilization, is each tab's its own process. Creates isolation, which is great,
right?
But it consumes resources on this Mac.
Yep.
And it's sucking up, every single tab is sucking up CPU and memory resources. And at some point, this machine slows down because I have 20 plus tabs open right now. Yeah. So there's an impact.
Yeah, and managing, I think, to lock down corporate browsers, I think a very difficult challenge that everyone faces, and I'd love to hear from our audience on this one, is if you're managing a Firefox or a Chrome, how are you managing add-ons for it? Because really, much of the performance impact, much of the security impact can come from the add-ons that are installed on top of it. Like Matt said, the browsers are really good at keeping themselves up to date, but your add-ons, what happens to those, right? And how do you know which ones they're installing? Again, it's like an operating system, so your users are installing software on top of that, and that software is vulnerable.
Yeah, and some of those add-ons are super heavy.
Yeah.
Again, as I've been diagnosing the Mac Mini at home for the studio at home, I'm disabling all those as well, because between the Chrome browsers, tabs that I have open, and Skype when I'm doing remote shows, you really see the impact to the machine.
I don't know if I added the article about Bromium, but since we're on the subject of isolation, they, I believe, do it very well. The feedback I hear from enterprises is it's a lot of time to integrate and configure and install. However, when I see it in action, I'm like, that is, the folks that work at Bromium send each other malware just for fun because it can't hurt their system. Yeah. They did a great job with the technology. Again, the feedback I get is in the implementation, and I'm sure those out there have done it very, very well. But I also think when we talk about locking down corporate browsers, that is much better, a much better road to go down in a strategy than trying to deal with all the other issues we talked about.
Yeah, and when we thinking about the operating system for a second, I mean, some of the things that Apple's doing with OS X and containerization at the operating system level, I think is where we're going to see the operating system continue to move. Where now I can start to isolate functionality within the operating system through containers and creating isolation. And so things like Bromium, the question for me with Bromium in the future is, if the operating systems do it themselves natively, will something like a Bromium still be required to create some of that isolation that they can probably get through the containerization of the OS? And Apple's been working on this for a while, and I think you're going to see that trend continue. And then since it's embedded in there, then maybe, Bromium's not required anymore. So we'll see where that plays out.
Mm-hmm. Cool. What's next?
Yeah, so I'm going to read this line from OneLogin because I think it's a little deceiving, personally. I like what they're doing, but OneLogin launches passwordless device authentication for Windows PCs without Active Directory. Okay. Look, we've talked about the password a lot and its inefficiencies, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you start reading this article, you're like, oh, good, I can get rid of the password. Well, not really. I mean, you're leveraging OneLogin's they're storing the username password for you and then allowing you to log in, but you still have to authenticate to your OneLogin environment. So I'm not sure it's fully passwordless like it says in the article, right?
Yeah, it's really authentication for Windows PCs without Active Directory.
Right.
And it's up to, I mean, you could implement some type of passwordless system, but it's probably better off that you are, or more likely that you're rolling your own type of authentication and steps, and that's based on the applications and data you're accessing and what your role is in the organization.
Yeah.
Maybe some users might be passwordless and other users maybe not.
May not be. Because when you get into the article, security policies can be set to require additional factors such as push notifications through OneLogin Protect, one-time SMS passwords, third-party vendors, or biometrics. There's still an aspect of the complexities of authentication still in the mix, even though they say passwordless in the title of the
here's
article.
the thing that we covered on a previous interview, that everyone's ready to poo-poo the password and get rid of the password. However, if we look at what we have that can replace it, it's not as easily changed out if it becomes compromised. If my phone becomes compromised, if the secure store on my phone and my fingerprint or not hashes, but the digital representation of my biometrics are compromised, if my physical token, YubiKey or whatever is taken, that's not easy.
My biometric hash, which is stored on the local device, because a lot of the biometrics are doing hashes of your biometrics, which could also be compromised. The one nice thing about a password is I can change it. Like, that's cool. I mean, I suppose you can expire the key, right? Yeah.
But someone does have physical access to that key, which just kind of weirds me out. But I guess from a security impact, that's not a huge deal. But again, the nice part about the password is super easy to change. Now I have a new password. If someone has my old one, it means nothing, right?
Right.
So,
which dovetails a little bit into the CyberArk unveils industry's most complete SaaS portfolio for privileged access management. So CyberArk making more enhancements to the privilege access offerings, which is great. I agree that some of these things are pretty cool. They zero trust for remote vendor access, just-in-time elevation and access with CyberArk endpoint. My only challenge with CyberArk personally is privilege access management is just one piece of identity and access management portfolio. And I really believe privilege access is a feature of a broader identity and access management platform.
But I thought CyberArk had a broader platform for that.
I don't. It's not in here. It's all about privilege. It's all about privilege access, privilege cloud, all the things that are related to privilege access management. And but there's more. Mm-hmm. There's more than just privilege access. Yes, it is a concern because people, administrators, et cetera, who need privileged access, making it easier to manage. I'd like to see them broaden the portfolio beyond privileged access and address some of the other identity and access.
But any level of access is also a privilege.
Yeah, in some respects.
Right?
Yeah. But their solutions are really for those escalated kind of privilege requirements, and it's a little narrowing for me. Thycotic also had an announcement in here this week. Oh, yeah.
They're playing in the Vault market now.
Yep.
Which I was kind of surprised that they didn't have a Vault. I'm just starting to look into some of that.
Well, it's more vaulting for, I think it was around DevOps and cloud, actually.
Which, by the way, is really where you need a Vault.
Correct. Right? If we think about, I'm trying to find the article here. When we think about what's happening with DevOps and service accounts and authentication of all these things that are going on the application side, containers and microservice authentication, et cetera. This is very specific as privileged access management as a service solution for the DevOps environment to manage those privileged accounts, which I think is very important. They're primarily service-based accounts. So this is an extension. Thycotic's done a lot of vaulting technologies on the endpoint and other things over the years. So now they're moving beyond endpoint into these other areas. Great. But again, it's a privileged access management solution, and I think it's still a subset of a broader identity and access management play. I think we're going to see a lot more announcements and movement in this space because, as I said, app user data and managing identity and access across these very diverse, complex environments is going to continue to be something as a thorn in our side, and you'll see more announcements. I just want to see some of the broader IAM players, and we've seen some of these announcements over the past few months, is you're starting to see that expansion of capabilities. In modern applications, such as the one that we're writing in-house here, you have a lot of secrets to manage. It's just amazing. Like, there's WordPress,
credentials to the database.
YouTube.
There's API keys for everything. Yeah. But on top of API keys, a lot of times it requires a username and password, which is not your username and password that you use to authenticate to the application itself. It's a separate username and password that's used sometimes in conjunction with a set of API keys. And then you've got your database credentials, right? Then you've got whatever you're running your application on top of, whether that's a container or an operating system, and there's privileges there. And then there's privileges into your Git system. There's privileges into your CI/CD software, like Jenkins as an example. And so you just end up with all these credentials all over the place.
And better management of those are going to be important.
HashiCorp. So what I've been talking with people is HashiCorp makes a vault, and of course CyberArk acquired Conjur. Conjur, like the English word conjure. Yep. And now Thycotic, and there's some other ones out there too. But the one that always seems to come up is HashiCorp's vault.
Yep, exactly. Oh, let's see what else is in here. Holy cow. So many stories. So little time.
I know. CrowdStrike?
Oh, yeah. I mean, everybody's tracking this IPO, right? I mean, probably one of the best IPOs in modern time for the security space. I mean, excellent IPO. And I track the stock, right? I mean, they're going to... CrowdStrike will come into the Security Weekly 25 index because of their valuation. They have to come in. And so for the next quarterly update, when we do it in October, I'll bring CrowdStrike into the index. But they announced their results, beat expectations, and the stock price went up like over $10 that day. I mean, just that thing is, I think it was something like $80-something a share. And the original IPO price was targeted around 28 to 32, I think. I mean, the growth on that stock in the last, 6 to 8 weeks just been crazy. Just crazy.
A lot of people here kicking themselves.
Going, I wish I would have bought it at 40, then 60, and now it's sitting at 80.
This is why we're cybersecurity professionals, and this is not
we're investment bankers.
Security Weekly.
Right.
This is not Investment Weekly. This is Security Weekly.
I mean, they met expectations on a loss. They had a loss of 47 cents a share, which is still a pretty big loss. They exceeded on revenue. The stock, like I said, skyrocketed like $10 that day. Again, I, as an investor, personal investor, I want to start to see a turn towards profitability.
Yeah.
They're expected to still have a loss this year. Over time, what will keep all of these security stocks in check is when do they become profitable? When can they start to turn a profit? Because in the Security Weekly 25 Index, only 11 of the 25 companies in there, and even when I throw CrowdStrike in, the number will be the same. It'll still be 11 of the 25 are only turning a profit, right? So what's going to happen to these other 14 over time as they continue to stay in the public market? Profitability, I think, will become a key factor for broader investment, especially from the institutional investors over time. So something to watch.
I want to talk about Greenbone Security, who claims now they have a feed that detects and protects against more than 70,000 vulnerabilities. I'm not sure how they do the protection aspect of it, if they've got some kind of patching in there. But here's the thing about, and they talk about CVEs as well. It's not about the total number of vulnerabilities you can detect. It's more about how well and how accurate you can detect them.
Yep.
It's not about the CVEs, because a lot of things that scanners can detect don't necessarily map back to a CVE, or one particular module can cover a whole bunch of different CVEs that are essentially the same vulnerability that live in different pieces of software that you can detect reliably. The other thing is, if you look at that number, you may say, well, I really want to protect against those 70,000. The percentage of software that you probably have within that 70,000 is probably pretty small, right? Like, you're better off, like they're covering software in those CVEs that you'll never have in your environment, right? That's very vertical and industry specific, that has a very, very small use case that's very, and that software, because not a lot of eyeballs on it, if you were to go do some testing against it, you could probably find a lot of vulnerabilities in it. However, selecting software based on that that's not helping you out, right? Like, you probably have Windows and Active Directory, right?
Adobe, Java, all the really high vulnerable stuff.
You probably don't have a lot of the specific industrial and scientific software that may have vulnerabilities. Yeah. And that's just not helping you. All that's really doing is creating more opportunity for the software to create false positives, which can weigh you down in a number of different ways.
Now, when we were at Tenable, you used to track in the lab kind of the coverage of CVEs across Tenable, Qualys, and Rapid7. Do you remember some of the totals back then?
Yeah, it was about 40,000.
Okay.
I want to say Nessus was at around 40,000. I want to say it was Rapid7 that was right behind it with like 37. Behind that was Qualys at like 36 or 35. So they were pretty close.
Yeah, they were pretty close.
There was no, again, I've talked about this publicly, right? There was no rhyme or reason to the coverage when you started analyzing the data. Sure, their respective research teams had rhyme or reason, and I get that. But like, I did the diff of, okay, show me all of the vulnerabilities that Qualys covers that Rapid7 and Tenable do not, and then just shift your matrix, right? And show me all the ones that Tenable has that these others don't. But there was everyone covered different vulnerabilities, right? Essentially, is what I'm saying.
So I think what's important in this article, 70,000 is a lot of vulnerability detections, right? Which is, this is what the research teams at these organizations do, is they're building vulnerabilities. But when you're evaluating these types of solutions, you got to look at the breadth and the depth based on what's in your environment. If I'm a Linux shop, who's covering the Linux vulnerabilities the best and the deepest, right? Because you're going to see variation across all these vendors. And what's interesting about Greenbone, for those who don't know,
it's from the open source, right?
So Greenbone is the commercial version of OpenVAS. OpenVAS was the fork at Nessus 2.0 when Tenable took Nessus off the open source
in around 2007.
Yeah, whenever that was.
Yeah. And there are over 118,000 currently CVEs, according to CVEdetails.com. Just to put that in perspective. Right. That even if you got 70,000, you're still missing the whole
You're still missing 48,000 vulnerability detections.
And that doesn't count vulnerabilities that don't get a CVE.
Correct.
That should round out this segment. I don't think there's much else in there.
No, not really. I mean, I expect a lot of news right before Black Hat and obviously at Black Hat. So we're going to see a lot more announcements coming over the next couple of weeks as we get to Black Hat.
So with that, we'll take a short break and come back with one of our interviews for the show. So stay tuned.